Hello and welcome back to the Sky Mobile Transfer Show, which we are running weekly throughout the summer window, discussing the latest deals and business going on in this crazy window. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by AFTV's Robbie Lyle. Robbie, welcome. How are you?
No, I'm good. Not too bad.
Great to see you.
It's good to be here.
It's great to have you. And we've got Mikey McCubbin of Sky as well. How are you, Mikey?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Glad to be back on the show.
Yeah, it should be an epic one. Today we are discussing all things Arsenal. Specifically, has their summer business made them favourites for this year's Premier League title? Let's get straight into it, Robbie. The one that's sort of ruminating at the moment, it's taking a little while to be fully confirmed, is Mikel Merino from Real Sociedad to Arsenal. Do you think that is the sort of signing that Arsenal should be making? What have you made of him? Are you impressed by what you've seen?
Well, he looked great in the Euros when he came on. I always remember that goal he scored, that header, which, that was a really important goal as well, because, they could have been going out, and that got them through. And, he's played in the Premier League before, of course, at Newcastle. And so he'll know what the Premier League's about. And I think it's a sensible signing, you know what I mean? And since Xhaka left, we haven't replaced that midfielder, that sort of left-sided midfielder, box-to-box, number 8, strong. We've not really replaced Xhaka. We sort of put Havertz in there for a while last year. We had other people playing in there, pushed Declan Rice further forward into that position. So I think by bringing him in, it really helps the balance of the team. Again, it's another aerial threat. He's, when you look at his record, he's great at winning duels, and he's very, very technically good, which is what Mikel Arteta likes. So I think it'd be a great signing. It's one of those signings where, when you look at it first, it's not your glamorous Chelsea signing, as I say, right? But it's a signing that makes sense.
Love it. And do you think, some people have said that he might play as a 6 and Rice pushes out to an 8. Do you think the fact that he can play both positions, you might need to play less of Jorginho and Partey this year? That's only a good thing for Arsenal, surely.
Yeah, it's all about squad depth. I was discussing this a couple of days ago with somebody who was saying to me, yeah, but what happens to Partey? I'm saying, listen, these guys get injured a lot. We've seen over the past seasons, So it's about having that squad depth. And I'm also wondering with some of the signings that Arsenal are making, is that an indication that Mikel Arteta going to take some of these cup competitions a little bit more seriously this year? I think he's under a little pressure, despite how well he's done. He's under a little pressure to at least win something this season. So, he's going to want to, do well in the FA Cup, do well maybe even in the League Cup, maybe see a stronger team than we put it out in seasons gone by. But certainly I think this guy's going to have a major role to play. The fact that Mikel Arteta's going after a guy that's 28, that's not really been the profile of the players he's been bringing in recent seasons, So that shows me that this is somebody that he really wants, So I'm happy with. I'm going to be happy with that signing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a win now signing. The only 2 players that played at the weekend against Wolves that are older than him was Trossard and Partey. So the squad is generally a really young squad. Mikel Merino is definitely a win now signing. I do hear you about getting a trophy in the cabinet, another one, because that 2020 FA Cup wasn't really Arteta's Arsenal in the same way that this side is now. And the noise is just getting louder and louder because Arsenal are getting closer and closer, but haven't got over the line in the Premier League, which we'll come on to in due course. But Mikey, Robbie mentioned there a little bit about his Premier League experience. He had a reasonably difficult start to his career, with Dortmund and Newcastle, but he has bounced back spectacularly at Real Sociedad, hasn't he?
Oh yeah, amazing. The fact that him and Martin Zubimendi, have been 2 of the most prominent names, going around the rumour mill this summer, of course, with Liverpool's efforts to sign Zubimendi, and Real Madrid and Barcelona are also being linked with him, I think speaks volumes about the partnership that they built at Real Sociedad, and I think it will be sad to see that broken up. Like I do expect this Merino deal to go through at some point. It does feel inevitable, and even if Zubimendi stays at Sociedad as looks likely at this moment in time as we're recording this, I think that's going to be. That's going to signify a huge change at Sociedad. But yeah, like Robbie was saying, like Merino has so many great attributes to his game, especially the physical part of his game. You know, yeah, like his aerial win rate is absolutely ridiculous. I think he ranks in the top 1% of midfielders for aerial duels won. He's also got a great fitness record. I think he's only played fewer than 32 league games once in the last 5 years. So like that's really, really positive.
I don't go for that, by the way, right, because we used to say that about Thomas Partey when he first came in. He was never ever injured at Atletico, and then he comes and next, you know. So.
Yeah, well, it remains to be seen, I guess. It remains to be seen. But I'm just trying to give reasons to be positive. But also, like he does get involved in the final third as well. You know, 7 goals and 12 assists across the last 2 seasons in La Liga. I think that's really positive as well. And he's not quite, you know, he's not a Granit Xhaka level passer. Like in terms of his progressive passes, he's not on the level of Xhaka. But I think in terms of his goal threat, he does provide that. Of course, in terms of his aerial ability in the box at both ends of the pitch, he provides that. And we've seen how much Arsenal have become a set-piece team and how much that set them apart from the rest of the league, especially last season with Declan Rice on corners. Like they just went to a new level in that sense. So I think in terms of what Arteta needs now, I think Merino is that in some ways. I think Arteta's almost moved past Granit Xhaka in terms of how he wants that midfield to play. And I think his experience of playing alongside Zubimendi as well will be really, really useful because in some ways there are similarities between him and Declan Rice in terms of they're not, you know, those out-and-out destroyer number 6s. They can kind of play a little bit as an 8 as well. They're great passers as well. I think that will be really, really useful. To have in the squad, someone who I think will be suited to playing alongside a kind of Rice sort of player.
Okay, we're all in agreement. Big fans of the Merino deal. It is a win now signing, as I said earlier. Let's discuss the other incomings at Arsenal this year. Of course, David Raya is signed permanently. I think he had a really good, particularly end to the season last year. You know, obviously ended up winning the Premier League Golden Glove with 16 clean sheets, a pretty solid save percentage as well. His real best attribute, I think, is claiming crosses that came into the area. 12% of crosses that came into the Arsenal area, he claims really effectively. And you look at someone like Vicario at Spurs, you look at some of the issues that Onana's had at Man United, that is really crucial in the modern game as well. And for Arsenal to have increased the physicality and the height all across their side, you know, this is now a really intimidating side to come up against. And I do think that makes a huge difference. We saw it with City in the last few years as well, with Diaz and Gvardiol and Akanji coming in. It feels like Pep and Arteta are really targeting larger and larger players. It feels like the era of these really small, diminutive midfielders like your Xavis and Iniestas. Maybe we're slightly moving past that, and physicality is really coming back into the game. So David Raya is confirmed. We, of course, know all about him. But let's talk about Riccardo Calafiori, Robbie. Was that a position that you thought Arsenal needed this summer? And what are you excited to see him sort of integrate into the side?
Yeah, listen, another guy that was outstanding in the Euros. Looked really, really impressive. That was even before I saw us being linked to him. I was like, hey, this guy looks good, right? And then, you know, I was a bit surprised that we were going for him because I was looking at it thinking, well, you know, Urian Timber's coming back. You've got Tomiyasu who also can play on that left-hand side as well as Zinchenko. And you've got Kivior as well. So when we were then starting being linked with Calafiori, I was happy because he's a quality player. But I was just like, where's he going to play? And, you know, do we really need him? But I was over on the tour in America with Arsenal. And I was there when they announced him. And first of all, like, I met him. He's a big physical, he's another one. Guy's a big physical presence, right? And he's still only 22 or something like that. And also, Mikel Arteta, in the press conference when he was announced, he was asked that question, you know, why Calafiori, where's he going to play? And he said, listen, he goes, last year, he goes, we got lucky in a way and that we had no injuries to Saliba or Gabriel. He goes, but you can't keep gambling like that. You've got to have like quality players in those areas. So he said he can see him playing either as a centre-back or as a left-back. And I think, you know, that's why he's brought him in. Whether he's just going to be cover, I mean, I don't know, because he's a top quality player, but he's still very young and his time will come. But certainly, it's like you said, it's another strengthening of that back line. And you've got Timber coming back, which is like a new signing. And in pre-season, he looked like a monster playing at centre-back. And let's not forget, when we brought Timber in, he was actually really a centre-back at Ajax. And then he's come in and we've had him playing right back and left back. So it strengthens that back line again, you know, and it's like you guys were just saying, I think, you know, he's going for that physical presence, you know, intimidating team. We used to be intimidated, Arsenal. I listen,
era.
I still remember the days of going away to Stoke and Bolton and those teams and getting bullied up. You can't bully this Arsenal team anymore, no, not with players like what they're bringing in, and Calafiori, Yuri and Timber. These guys, these are strong physical guys. So I'm very happy with the signing. I'm really excited to see how he's going to fit into that Arsenal team. But like Mikel Arteta said, we did get lucky last year. Remember the previous season, Saliba got injured. That was it.
Holding comes in.
That was it. Yeah, the level that came in weren't the same. You know, no disrespect to Rob Holding, and then we kind of fell away towards the end of the season. I think Mikel Arteta's learning from that and saying, no, we're going to have strength there. That, you know, and that's what City do have, isn't it? You know, like you said, they've got Gvardiol. And to be in all fairness, Gvardiol's not really come in and played centre back, which is the position in which he's made his name. He's been playing like left back.
Yeah.
So, and same with Aki.
Yeah, for sure. It felt like, yeah, you're right to point out what happened at the end of the one before last season. Also last year, you had that dodgy patch in December when the games got really thick and fast, and having rotation options, I think, can only strengthen you there. Before we get into how highly Robbie rates this window and whether it makes them title favourites, I wanted to discuss some of the outgoings as well. Because were you a little sad to see a Hale End graduate in Emile Smith Rowe depart for Fulham? I mean, even though I think you got an excellent fee for him, that was, you know, he was a big player for you.
Yeah, you know, I think really sad. You know, you speak to most Arsenal fans, are really gutted to see him go. And the sadness is really there. Is that number one, he's come all the way through the ranks. Number two, he kind of helped to bring Arsenal back. When we were really suffering, it was him and Saka, who were the two guys that sort of led us out of those real problems that we had. And then he's just had injury after injury. It's not really been his fault. The drop-off is because of injuries only. And then obviously now, I think everybody understands that, you know, he wants to play, you know, and I think, you know, I think it's the right thing on both sides that he's, you know, moved on to another club and that he gets to play. And because remember, this was a guy who was in the England squad and everything, you know, so he needs to play, and it's the right move. It was really sad, you know what I mean? I contrast that, and I don't need to keep mentioning Chelsea, right? I contrast that to Chelsea, how they're handling some of their young players coming, you know, their graduates and that, and how we're sad to see him go. They're trying to force their ones out, you know, so that they can make money and bring more people in, and that's where I think I'm happy with our transfers, how we're doing things, but it's sad. It is sad to see him go, but we wish him all the best at Fulham. I hope he does well.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. We've also seen El Neni leave, left on a free, again, from a different sort of era of Arsenal, really, but did perform well on occasion as well. The Eddie Nketiah situation is quite interesting, the Cubs. It feels like there's kind of a bit of a battle going on between Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace potentially as well, but Nottingham Forest also have other targets in Santiago Jimenez. What's sort of going on?
Yeah, I mean, it still kind of feels like Santiago Jimenez would be the premium signing for Forest, given the amazing record he's had over the last couple of years at Feyenoord, you know, 20 plus goals in the league last year. But again, it's with Nketiah, I think it's a bit like Smith Rowe, not necessarily in terms of injuries, but you know, he is a Premier League quality striker. But I think there's a fear that if he was to stay at Arsenal for another year, you know, I don't know, things could stagnate a little bit. You know, he's yet to have that, you know, 2-3 month run in a side, and I think, you know, he's capable of hitting double figures in the Premier League, but he hasn't done so, partly because he hasn't really had that opportunity. And I think, you know, ultimately it'll be down to whoever's willing to pay the fee, and also who's willing to pay Nketiah's wages as well, because he's on an estimated £100,000 a week. You know, it's quite a big wage for a striker who, you know, is yet to hit double figures in a league season. But I think he would. You know, in some ways, I could see him, you know, doing better at Palace than Forest. You know, there's a little bit less rotation in that side. At Forest, you've got kind of Chris Wood, Awoniyi to deal with. And
although you still have Mateta at Crystal Palace.
You still have Mateta at Crystal Palace and Edouard too, but I just feel like there's, I don't know, maybe a little bit more fluidity in that forward line. To be fair, yeah, I think you're up against it with both of those teams.
But he's different to all of them, though. I think that's why he suits either of those teams, because he's different. All those players you've spoken about are sort of big physical players, apart from Edouard, I guess, but they're all big physical players, whereas Eddie isn't. He's more sort of a poacher.
Yeah,
will be up there, and and I'm in agreement with Arsenal, by the way, holding out for this 30 million as well, because when I see like Broja's gone to Ipswich for 30 million, I'm like, well, I think Eddie's better.
Yeah,
I think Eddie Nketiah is a better player. So. And I'm with you. I think he'll score. He hasn't had he's never really had a full chance at Arsenal, because it's really difficult to start as a striker there. But I think if he went to a Forest or a Palace, I think he'd get a lot of game time and score a lot of goals.
I think on the subject of that, so saying Nketiah leaves, that's one less attacking reinforcement you've got there in the squad. You spoke about the defence particularly the year before last, and Arteta's, ambition to have a completely, proofed back line. If Saliba was to get injured, you've got Calafiori and Timber there, for example, and of course you've got so much cover on the left in particular now. I still feel like in the forward line, do you think there's something missing there? Like, not even so much. I mean, I guess we could talk about centre forward, say if Havertz was to get injured or Jesus was to get injured again, and also on the right hand side, like what happens if Saka gets injured? Is that a concern for you?
It's the doomsday scenario.
yeah, that is a doomsday, right? To me, the window so far has been good, but we have to sign a forward player in my book, especially if Reece Nelson goes. We have to. I mean, when I saw the earlier links to Nico Williams, I was like, that would have been absolutely perfect. Don't think, obviously, he's going to stay. He's not going to leave. So, but I do think if it's not a striker, I mean, at first I was like, we could do with a striker, but I guess looking at Havertz's record, and I saw that Sky's did a great thing on Havertz's record, I think a couple of days ago. He's really performed well, and I think he's going to do even better this season because he's confident now, and he's now part of this team, and the fans are really behind him. But we need another, like you said, a cover for Saka, someone who can maybe play on both wings, who's capable of scoring goals, capable of making an impact. I feel that is essential for Arsenal. I'd be disappointed if we didn't sign a forward player. And as I said, especially if Reece Nelson was to leave, he's still been linked with a move away. If Eddie and Reece Nelson goes and we bring it, that's sort of three attacking players in like Smith Rowe, Eddie, and Reece Nelson. He's surely got to bring in another wide player. To, and I think there's a couple out there, so, that's going to be the intriguing one for me. We ain't got long to do it either because, the transfer window is shutting on the 30th of this month, so we ain't got long to do it, and I haven't really seen major names sort of being pushed forward. I'm just wondering if Arsenal are cooking up something, and I'm hoping and praying they're cooking up something in the background on one of these wide players. Because I do think it will be a wide player. I don't think it's going to be a Osimhen. I don't think it's going to be a Gyökeres, or I don't think it's going to be one of those personally. But we need that. I think we do need that.
Do you think you need that to be, I guess, getting onto the title of the show?
Big question.
Like, obviously, I feel like in general people are a lot more hot on Arsenal this season than last. 2 seasons really challenging City hard. Yeah. Do you think signing a wide player does that give Arsenal the edge over City? Do you think does that turn Arsenal from second favourites to favourites, or do you think Arsenal are already favourites given the business that's been done?
I look at it as like joint favourites at the moment.
Okay.
Right? I saw City the other day. They're still City. They've still got a great squad. They still got Pep Guardiola. That's the essential piece that they have there. So I think it's like joint favourites because the margins last year were narrow. But I do feel, if we don't get that forward player in, you've got to give them the edge because they still got Erling Haaland, they still score loads and loads of goals, right? Even though we scored loads and loads of goals last year, but I still think we could score more. And an attacking player that's going to come in and bring the goals, especially a guy that could come off the bench if need be and have that impact, I think is very important. We're looking, as I said, if all those guys go, we're a bit weaker there, aren't we? You know what I mean? So I feel that's an essential position that needs to be filled because, it just wouldn't make sense then to let Eddie and Reece go and we haven't brought in another player on that forward line.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're relying on Jesus staying fit, which
never
for
really
the past
happened.
couple of seasons he hasn't, right? So...
And even going back further at Man City, he really struggled with his fitness at various points as well. It feels like the reports are this morning that City are looking at another forward as well. There's reports online, by the time this video goes out, maybe they'll be confirmed or denied, but they're looking at Kyogo of Celtic. Gundogan is supposedly close to a return as well, which is a really interesting, return from him. I think he played really well at Barcelona last year. He probably didn't expect to play the minutes he did, but Gavi got injured. Pedri had fitness issues as well. He actually ended up being their most used player in La Liga. And there's reports that Barcelona are just doing it so they can get his wages off the books. They're not even getting a fee for him. It seems absolutely nuts. And
so that Arsenal were even trying to sneak in there as well for it.
Fair. I think he'd suit pretty much every club in the Premier League. I do think he's that quality. Yes, he's 33, and yes, you wouldn't want the fee to be considerable. You wouldn't want the wages to be massive either. But this is a player who has made title-winning contributions in the past as an 8. You can also play as a 6 if Rodri needs a rest. You saw Kovacic playing that role at the weekend, but I do think Gundogan is maybe a slightly better 6 than Kovacic, even though both their dream positions are more of a box-to-box role. So I think you can make the case for City, making some late moves as well, and that could improve them.
And they've lost Alvarez, so I do feel with them losing Alvarez, they've got them also have to, because what if Haaland got injured, which he did last year? So,
but it's crazy. With 10 days of the window to go, Mikey, both of the title favourites are probably going to make some moves.
Yeah, massively. And I mean, I guess on Alvarez, you remember back, you kind of go back to the 2020-21 season when Gundogan was kind of playing almost like a kind of false 9. Like maybe there's a bit of thinking there. Maybe they are thinking, maybe we can employ Gundogan in that position. I don't know whether he's as mobile as he was back then, 3 years older. But yeah, I think this is the thing, like going into these last 2 weeks, I think for me, Arsenal, I really do see Arsenal improving on their points tally from last season, given the extra strength that they've got. If their key players can stay fit, that squad is just another year together, another year older. Arteta's another year wiser as a manager. Like it just feels like, Arsenal have improved points-wise, season on season. I don't see why they're going to stop doing that this year. Whereas going into the season, at least, I don't feel like you can guarantee that necessarily for Man City, given that at least their starting lineup, their squad in general, hasn't been improved all that much. And I feel like the last 2 seasons, I think like last season in the Premier League, I would argue that City were not quite as impressive as they were the year before. Some may beg to differ. City often start quite slow, but in general, I thought Arsenal were more impressive. But then, I don't know, like if you bring Gundogan back into that side, that is that's a kind of, that's almost like a kind of Paul Scholes coming out of retirement for Man United in 2012. It's got that kind of vibe to it, and that you're bringing someone back into an area of the field where City did lack a little bit last year. The Kovacic signing didn't quite come off last year. Maybe will prove to this year, but not last year. Matheus Nunes, yet his City career is yet to take off, and that was one area of the field where I think they were a little bit weaker than before. And of course, Haaland getting injured as well, midway through the season. So, there are a number of things that could still hurt City. But I think, there's something about Gundogan, if he does come back, just that extra piece of experience, someone who's still at the top of his game, someone who I think, also great fitness record too. If De Bruyne was to get injured again, which, is not out of the question given his fitness record over the last few years. If Jack Grealish, if he has another troubled season, that's a player who can fill in those kind of spaces for City, and gives again like Pep another kind of tactical weapon that he can use. And I think that's probably how City will win it this season. It won't necessarily be from, having the most star-studded side necessarily, even though they still do. I think it will again be Pep doing, working some piece of genius with that squad.
17 games unbeaten, as usual. There we have it. Okay, Robbie sounds like he's going joint favourite. I'm still going Arsenal. Mikey maybe edging more towards Man City now.
I think it's a tough one. Yeah, I think you know what it is. It's just seeing that performance against Chelsea, where they were probably playing at about 60-70%, and they still put Chelsea away fairly comfortably. I know Chelsea had their chances, but it does just, again, it's just Pep just wants to get a strong.
The machine is back in action.
While we've got you, Robbie, actually, what did you make of Arsenal's performance against Wolves?
I thought he was okay. For me, it was a typical first day of the season performance where some really good bits, but then a bit of sloppiness, which I think a lot of that was due to the fact that there's still a bit of tiredness there. Declan Rice only played 2 games in pre-season. He's one of the England players that came back late. Same with Saka as well. So, and there's various players within the team that it's not the normal pre-seasons that we've had over the past couple of years. When was the last time you saw Declan Rice coming off a cramp, Yeah. So it was a little, I thought we got a little sloppy in it at moments. But I was pleased. It was 2-0 clean sheet, and again, I thought we had another gear if we wanted to. So you could still see the strength of the teams there, and the pre-season was good as well. I thought in pre-season we looked pretty good. So I'm pretty optimistic. I think if we get that wide player, that forward player in, then I might be pushing us on a favourite tip. But until that comes in, at the moment, to me, it's just joint favourites. I can't. Yeah.
I feel like in some ways, Arsenal could have done with Savio. Really, like that would have been a great signing. Like a player who had a really good first game against Chelsea.
Football group selling him to Arsenal.
I know, obviously it wouldn't have happened, but just someone in that profile, and just think.
It's not supposed to matter, is it?
But I just think given that City don't necessarily need that much cover out wide, given the wealth of talent they already have. Someone in that mould, in that Savio mould, I think would be a perfect kind of signing for Arsenal. But yeah, and who knows, maybe, if he has the kind of season that he had in Spain last year and Pep continues to start him, maybe he will actually have a decisive effect for City.
There we have it. Right, let's move on to our Sky Mobile Switch of the Week to wrap up the show. These are our favourite completed transfers of the last week. It's actually not been a crazy week in terms of completed deals, but Robbie, I'll give you some options. Maybe you can pick your favourite. So Jorginho Rutter to Brighton, Evan Nielsen to Bournemouth, Skip to Leicester, Critchley to Southampton, Smodics to Ipswich, Cameron Archer to Southampton. Any of those take your fancy as your favourite of the week?
There's no real sort of one that jumps out. The Rutter one's interesting because he did have a really good season last year for Leeds. It was very, very important for them after initially coming in the previous January, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And he weren't all that. 40 million's a lot though. I'm like, but then it's Brighton. And they don't get many things wrong. They see, for them to make that outlay on him, I'll get the feeling he's going to be a very good signing. It's a lot of money that I've never seen. Surely that's their transfer record, Brighton.
I think it is, yeah.
40 million, but they've taken a big punt on that, but you got to trust them. Some of the signings they've made, like over the past seasons, have just been so good. I'm going to trust this one and say I think that is going to be a really good signing.
I like it. Mikey, because they do have a lot of depth up front as well, don't you? With Welbeck and Ferguson and the wide talent they've got now at their options. Is amazing.
I like the Brighton depth is just about, and that's the thing, I guess, like Rutter, I think he only scored 6 last year. Despite he's a bit more of a creative forward, but they don't necessarily need to rely on him for goals because they've got so many goals from out wide. Like Kaoru Mitoma's back with a bang, isn't he? Simon Odingra is a really good goal scorer from out wide as well. He's been rumoured to be a kind of target for Arsenal, hasn't he? Or at least Arsenal fans.
Yeah, I take him. I take a Dingra. He's still a bit raw, but I like him. And could. The amount of money that Brighton are spending,
might they need to sell someone?
Some of them might have to go. Could it be him? Because I've heard that rumour with Adingra being linked with Arsenal. and he's he plays on the right hand side as well, and he'd be great backup to Saka, and a great player to bring on later on if he the impact with his pace.
Yeah.
I'm wondering. I don't know. Also, over the past couple of seasons, they pulled off a couple of
shock ones.
Yeah. I wondered, could that be it? I don't know.
I really don't know. Transfer journalists are mentioning anything. Arsenal announced a dingo.
So yeah, and I get the fact that they've brought in Yankuba Minte as well, plays on the right. So yeah, I think like Adingra is someone who I think they could. He is expendable in some ways. If they were to get, like say 40 million for him, I think that's the kind of price that he's worth. So yeah, and potentially Matt O'Reilly coming in from Celtic as well, who double figures for goals and assists last year from attacking midfield. So yeah, I mean Brighton are absolutely stacked at this point, and they've spent more money than they ever have done in the summer this year as well. So I think this could be another season in which we see Brighton come back to the fore.
Fair enough. My Sky Mobile switch of the week is Evanilson to Bournemouth, mainly because I'm just really fascinated by it, to be honest. I've watched this guy at FC Porto a fair few times. He was, alternating with Mehdi Taremi, who's now joined Inter Milan on a free transfer as their sort of key man. But there's a certain amount of pressure on his shoulders for a man new to the Premier League, joining mid to late August, replacing Solanke, who scored 19 league goals last year, was one of, I think, the most underrated players in the league last year, Solanke. And Evanilson does have an impressive record in Portugal, 60 goals and 21 assists in 154 games. But the outlay on him is pretty massive, to be honest. And, he's hit over 20 goals in all competitions twice in the last 3 seasons. But that middle campaign, just 10, did have a few injury issues in there. And, there are players in that Bournemouth team that can chip in. Justin Kluivert had a good year last year. Semenyo's really taken a few leaps on. I mean, I remember when he was representing my club Sunderland a few years ago, did not think he was going to get to this level in the Premier League. So that there are options there for Antonio Raiola, but Evanilson coming in this late in a window for that sort of fee, there's a lot of pressure on him. There's a lot of pressure on him. Really, strong, physical, very good all-round game. But I'm intrigued to see how that one goes for Evanilson at Bournemouth. So those are our Sky.
I've seen him. I saw when he played against Arsenal, man. He weren't bad.
Arsenal fans I sort of seeing online were sort of touting him as the backup for Havertz potentially.
He weren't bad. He weren't bad.
Yeah, there we have it. So Evanilson to Bournemouth, one to watch, along with Jorginho Rutter to Brighton. Guys, thank you so much for watching the Sky Mobile transfer show for this week. Remember that with all the transfers going on between clubs this summer, it's never been easier to switch your network to Sky Mobile. All you need to do is text PAC, P-A-C, to 65705. That's 65705. And Sky Mobile will do all the rest. Big thanks to Mikey. Big thanks to our main guest today, Robbie Lyle. Thank you very much, Robbie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.